Comics bring us major laughs, but offstage, they can be suffering. These comedians have life stories that may make you shed a tear.
Brushes with death, family tragedies, box office flops, and divorce drama. The late Bob Saget went through a lot on his path to becoming America's dad. In his 2014 memoir, Dirty Daddy, Bob describes the trauma that his parents, Benjamin and Rosalind Saget, had suffered just 2 years before his birth. In 1954, Rosalind gave birth to twin boys named Robert and Faith at the hospital in the family's hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What the family didn't know at the time, however, was that the hospital was dealing with an outbreak of dysentery, which proved fatal to the twins within days of their birth and which took the lives of several other newborns. Bob also explains that he didn't enjoy the typical perks of a traditional father-son relationship growing up. Benjamin began his career as a butcher in a supermarket before working his way up into management, smoking 6 packs of cigarettes a day in the process. When Bob was 6, his father suffered a massive heart attack and had another one 6 months later that almost killed him. As such, though his father was a constant presence in his life, his health issues meant he and Bob didn't share typical father-son pastimes. As biography details, Saget didn't perform particularly well at school, with his low grades becoming even worse after his family relocated from Pennsylvania to California, though the Sagets soon returned to their home state. Saget graduated high school, and though he had harbored dreams of becoming a doctor, he was encouraged to pursue a career in a creative field after enrolling at Philadelphia's Temple University. There, he studied film and won an award for a documentary short he made in 1978. While he was then accepted into graduate school at the University of Southern California, the future comedian soon dropped out, later citing his own vanity for his lack of motivation. But as he explained in an interview with the Saturday Evening Post in 1990, a sudden brush with death changed his mentality. I was a cocky, overweight 22-year-old. Then I had a gangrenous appendix taken out, almost died, and I got over being cocky or overweight. In his memoir, Bob Saget suggests 2 ways in which comedy has worked as a survival tactic throughout his life. To begin with, Saget describes both his childhood at home and at school as survival of the wittiest, and that while he wasn't a tough kid, being ready with a smart comeback could work as an effective rebuttal against bullies. Though Saget does recall getting bloodied in fights that broke out after he was the subject of anti-Semitic remarks. But Saget also saw comedy as a mechanism by which to turn suffering into something joyous. In his memoir, Saget claims that he inherited his sense of humor from his father, writing, "Like me, my dad dealt with death and all the hardships in life through humor, sick and weird humor. Not always funny, but always some kind of metaphysical release from the pain. What emerges is the idea of off-color humor as a release valve for coping with life's tragedies, which Saget would have to deal with throughout his life." Elsewhere, Saget writes, "It was this part of my DNA that allowed me to lose 2 of the most important people in my life and push even harder to pursue a career in making people laugh." The 2 important people that Bob Saget lost tragically young were his beloved older sisters, who both died in their parents' lifetimes in heartbreaking circumstances. Saget wrote in his book, "I loved my sisters, Andy and Gay, very much. They were both school teachers, really good ones, which means they were underpaid and loved to impart as much wisdom and goodness as they could on their students. Andy died at the age of just 34 from a brain aneurysm, while Gay died at 47, just a few years after being diagnosed with systemic scleroderma, a chronic autoimmune disease that hardens and tightens the skin and connective tissues." Following the deaths of his sisters, Saget committed to fundraising, becoming a board member of the Scleroderma Research Foundation and raising awareness of the disease. Following Gay's death, Saget also directed a TV movie for Hope, which was based on the story of her life. Around the time of the birth of his first daughter, Bob Saget was beginning to make steps towards a career on the small screen. As he writes in his memoir, Saget's first major TV role was as a sidekick on a CBS show called The Morning Program, with Saget hired to provide the show with a comedic edge.
It's time now for This Week in History.
However, Saget lasted only 6 months in the role and was let go amid concerns that his performance wasn't a match for the show's audience, a major setback for a comedian with a young family in the early stages of his career. Saget later claimed, per biography, "The affiliates were upset. I was considered too hot for the morning, whatever that is."
I hope you don't get herpes. It's a hair. It's a hair.
Did you hear that?
Thankfully, he soon landed what would prove to be his most iconic role, that of Danny Tanner, the lead in the long-running sitcom Full House, which would make Saget a household name. Despite the lewd material of his stand-up shows, Bob Saget has always been known as a devoted family man, whose private life mirrors that of his most famous on-screen roles. But the comedian's love life wasn't always straightforward. Though Saget and his high school sweetheart Sherry Kramer would go on to have 3 daughters together following their marriage in 1983, their relationship disintegrated in 1997 as the Sun-Sentinel reports, with Kramer citing irreconcilable differences in the court documents. However, Saget and Kramer remained in contact, with the comedian getting in touch with his ex-wife to get her permission to include details of their life together in his memoir. In an interview with Parade, Saget expresses the joy that the children they had together brought to his life, saying, "The best thing I've done, the highest thing in my whole life is my daughters. If everything in my life is raised to the level of how great they are, then that would be a great thing to have achieved." Saget finally remarried in 2018 to Kelly Rizzo, telling Closer Weekly at the time that after his divorce more than 2 decades earlier, he never expected to find love again. Despite his many successes in front of the camera, Bob Saget still harbored the same filmmaking ambitions that he did as a student, and throughout his career was on the lookout for opportunities to put his directorial abilities to the test. One such opportunity came in the late 1990s when he was approached by his friend Norm Macdonald, who had recently become a major star thanks to his role on Saturday Night Live and his singular anchoring of the show's popular Weekend Update segment, to direct a movie the comedian had written, 1998's Dirty Work. In his memoir, Saget describes directing the movie as the wildest experience of his career. But while the movie came to be loved by both its creators and the comedian's fans, Dirty Work was a disappointment, both critically and commercially.
There's 2 kinds of people in this world, those who get stomped on and those who do the stomping.
Despite this, numerous sources claim that a sequel was in the works, with Norm Macdonald tweeting in 2019 that he had finished writing the script at Saget's behest. On the final page of Bob Saget's 2014 memoir, an author's note reads, "As the book went to press, I lost my loving mother at the age of 89. A beloved wife, mother, grandmother, aunt, and friend, she touched countless lives through the generations and will always be remembered. This is for you, Mom." Shortly after publication, Saget suffered another loss after his friend, the beloved comedian Robin Williams, was found dead at the age of 63. Saget told Culturated, "I took his loss very hard. I met him when I was 21, and he is mentioned throughout the book. How he left us is obviously not how I will remember him." But just as Saget always turned to comedy as a way of dealing with loss, the death of Williams also gave him a new sense of perspective and motivation to pursue his craft and make the most of the time he had left. He continued, "I can't waste time on things I used to as a younger man, just going crazy about things that I had no control over. It's time to really enjoy my work and my craft and just go out and do it well." In the final months of his life, Bob Saget was to suffer one more tragic loss, Norm Macdonald, who sadly died in September 2021 after suffering with leukemia privately for many years. The 2 comedians were more than colleagues. As discussed on Macdonald's Quarantined video series in March 2020, Saget was the first comedian that the aspiring 15-year-old Macdonald saw live.
I, afterwards, like an idiot, went up to you at the bar, like people do, like as if they're a part of the act. I'm like, "Hey, should we talk?"
The 2 struck up a friendship, and it was this encounter that Macdonald recalled when looking for someone to direct Dirty Work. The 2 maintained a strong friendship, with Macdonald providing a memorable performance during 2008's Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget, and Saget later appearing on Macdonald's podcast, Norm Macdonald Live. Following news of Macdonald's death, Saget published an emotional dedication to the late comedian, describing the loss of Macdonald as, quote, "a knife in the heart for all of us who were close to him and all of you who loved him." In a statement to The Hollywood Reporter, Bob Saget's family confirmed his death on January 9, 2022. "We are devastated to confirm that our beloved Bob passed away today. He was everything to us, and we want you to know how much he loved his fans, performing live and bringing people from all walks of life together with laughter." The suddenness of his death was deeply shocking. In his final tweet, Saget shouted out the crowd who saw his final performance, calling them an appreciative audience, and said he was happily addicted again to doing stand-up. Throughout his career, Jim Carrey has taken on challenging roles, pushed boundaries, and entertained plenty of fans. But like a lot of hilarious people, there's a darker side to his story. Carrey's early years growing up in the suburbs of Toronto weren't particularly easy. When he was 12, he struggled to make sense of life after his father lost his job. As he told The Hollywood Reporter in 2018, "I was angry. My father was hurting, so I blamed the world. It doesn't occur to you when you're a kid, hey, maybe my dad was a drag at work. Maybe he hated his job so much that he was just an emotional skunk."
When I was about 14 or 15, my father lost his job, and I actually became homeless for quite some time. Of course, I grew up in Canada, so I thought we had just gone camping.
Carrey's dad eventually found work in a tire factory, and young Jim and his siblings joined to help with just about everything. They would put in as much as 8 hours a day after school working as janitors and security guards at the factory. Carrey struggled to cope with everything that was happening around him. He used to get top-notch grades, but then his academic performance began to slip. His relationships similarly suffered, and when he turned 16 years old, he dropped out of school. His father was upset, but he didn't challenge his son, although, as Carrey admitted to The Hollywood Reporter, "Sometimes I wish he had." Carrey's relationship with his mother was hardly any less stressful, as she was often sick and depressed. At the dinner table, she would complain about her health, which scared her son. She came from a troubled past herself, as her parents were alcoholics, which made her crave love and attention, thus why she complained the way she did. And so her son couldn't help but worry about his parents' well-being. When Carrey decided to try his luck in the entertainment industry, he realized that things were going to be incredibly hard. It took him almost a decade to get noticed and to be taken seriously, as he focused on performing comedy whenever he could in a bid to land more gigs. As he told the New York Times in 1994, "For years I used to drive up to Mulholland Drive every night and look at the city and sit and imagine myself with all this money and being sought after." He didn't crave material wealth, he just wanted to excel at what he was doing. One time when he was 15, his father got him a gig at a Toronto comedy club, where he got booed off the stage. He was wearing a polyester suit that wasn't well received by the hip crowd, but he didn't give up as he tried again 2 years later, pulling off a considerably better performance with messy hair and no suit. When he was 19, he started performing in Los Angeles, working day in and day out until he got noticed by bigwigs like Sam Kinison and Rodney Dangerfield and landed TV roles. Carrey may have been determined, but that hardly means that things were always easy for him. Far from it, in fact. As he attempted to break into showbiz, he endured rejection after rejection. For example, when he auditioned for Saturday Night Live, he was turned down pretty much immediately. His tape wasn't even shown to executive producer Lorne Michaels. As Michaels told Vanity Fair in 2015, "I wasn't at the Jim Carrey audition, but someone who was there said, 'I don't think Lorne would like it,' and they were probably wrong, but it doesn't matter. Or maybe they were right, who knows? No one gets it all right." Despite this setback, Carrey eventually became successful, and even also got to show off his comedic chops live from New York. He's harbored no ill feelings against SNL or the people who make it, as he's hosted the show 3 times and also appeared on the 40th anniversary special in 2015 with an impression of Matthew McConaughey.
Free will is an illusion. Life is a game that plays us.
And in 2020, Carrey even landed a semi-regular SNL gig with his impression of Joe Biden. Even as he was starting to make his mark in Hollywood, Carrey still had to deal with plenty of loss. Both of his parents passed away within a few years of each other, his mother in 1991 and his father in 1994. Carrey has talked about how his dad indirectly helped him follow his dreams. His father was immensely talented and could have shown in the entertainment industry himself, but he was too afraid to take that risk. As Carrey told ABC News in 2014, "So many of us choose our path out of fear disguised as practicality. My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that was possible for him. So he made a conservative choice and instead he got a job as an accountant." The older Carrey was eventually forced to reconsider his options after he lost that accounting job, which taught his son to look at failure differently. As Jim Carrey sees it, it's possible to fail at something that seems like a safe option. In the end, it's a far better idea to fail at something you love doing and genuinely wish to pursue. And in Carrey's case, that's acting in comedy. It isn't just his professional life that's taken a toll on Carrey. To put it mildly, he hasn't always been lucky in love. He's talked about how his 2004 movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which revolves around the tragedy of lost romance, was something that he could personally relate to. As he told CBS News, "I was trying to speak to my ex and all this stuff and say these things, and I mean, artistically you do that, you know?" When asked who he was referring to, he simply replied, "I don't want to say. There are many that I've felt that way about, you know?" From 1987 to 1995, Carrey was married to actress Melissa Wermer. After their divorce, he was then briefly married to his Dumb and Dumber co-star Lauren Holly. He was also seriously involved with Renee Zellweger, whom he was engaged to before they parted ways in 2000. Afterwards, he dated Jenny McCarthy for almost 5 years. In 2010, a source told People magazine that Carrey can be difficult to be with in a romantic relationship, noting, "Jim can run hot and he can run cold. He is someone who desperately needs to be with someone, then just as desperately needs to be alone. But at the same time, he can be a very loving, very compassionate guy." In 2015, one of Carrey's ex-girlfriends, makeup artist Catriona White, killed herself. He served as a pallbearer at the funeral. Their relationship had its share of ups and downs, and they had broken up several times, including the week before she passed away. White was found to have overdosed on prescription drugs, but not everyone was convinced that she really killed herself. Her estranged husband and mother accused Carrey of giving her the drugs, so they sued him, but he responded that this was merely an attempt to take advantage of his status as a famous actor, and he filed a countersuit. After a bit of back and forth, Carrey was finally cleared of all charges and the lawsuits were dropped in 2018. Carrey is no stranger to mental illness. His movie characters may be known for making people crack up hysterically, but off-screen, the actor has privately fought depression for a long time, occasionally seeking professional help to cope with his symptoms. He spoke about his mental journey during a 2004 episode of 60 Minutes, as he revealed, "But people stay on it forever. I had to get off at a certain point because I realized that, everything's just okay." In 2017, Carrey revealed that he wasn't depressed anymore, but that he definitely had experienced it firsthand for many years. He also noted that he still had bad moments, but that they were fleeting and didn't stay with him anymore. In 2019, he had an online exchange with Ariana Grande after the pop star shared that Carrey's accounts of depression had helped her cope with her own battles. An honored Carrey replied to her on Twitter, "I read your lovely mention of me and things I've said about depression. I admire your openness. I wish you freedom and peace. I feel blessed to have such a gifted admirer." Despite being an incredibly talented and versatile actor, Jim Carrey has seen his fair share of professional ups and downs. Acting has recently taken a back seat in his life, though he hasn't totally forgotten his love for the craft. In 2018, he told the Associated Press that he found acting therapeutic. As he put it, "It's unfathomable to me that life somehow ended up in this direction and at this place of, being able to do something, alchemize our pain and turn it into something beautiful, and be recognized as well, for it is an incredible thing. But, right now my job has always been, I thought, to free people from concern, and that is part of the job of a comedian, an artist, but it's also his job to focus on things that are problematic, at times of trouble." Carrey also discussed why the frequency of his work has decreased, as he explained that the industry stopped appealing to him when corporations really began to make their presence felt. He was tempted to express himself through another creative medium, so he turned to painting to let his feelings flow freely. Carrey has always taken his roles very seriously, and sometimes he's lost himself in them. For example, when he played comedian Andy Kaufman in 1999's Man on the Moon, he realized how he could become completely immersed in a character. As he told TheTalks.com, "When I finished with that, I took a month to remember who I was. What do I believe? What are my politics? What do I like and dislike? It took me a while, and I was depressed going back into my concerns and my politics. But there was a shift that had already happened, and the shift was, wait a second, if I can put Jim Carrey aside for 4 months, who is Jim Carrey? Who the hell is that?" In the 2017 documentary Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, Carrey suggested that he was so immersed in the role of Kaufman that studio executives actually attempted to bury footage of him at the time to help safeguard his image. As it turns out, Jim Carrey is hardly what you would call a fan of being famous. In 2020, he published a novel called Memoirs and Misinformation. It's a fictional autobiography that explores the idea of fame and the many evils that come along with it. At one point in the book, Carrey decides to dress up before bed in case he dies in his sleep. This decision is made after he sees pictures of John Lennon's dead body on the internet. The point Carrey is making is simple. Fame is not easy to deal with. As explained to USA Today, "That's a very weird thing to know about yourself, that when I die, someone is going to take a picture on the operating table and sell it." It's also worth noting that while Carrey may have a very recognizable public persona, he's actually rather private and has always been skeptical about fame. Carrey understands that being famous means that he will be pushed into the limelight no matter what's happening in his life. As he once said, "I don't believe in personalities. I believe that peace lies beyond personalities, beyond invention and disguise."
Chris Farley's unique comedy stylings delighted Saturday Night Live viewers and moviegoers throughout the 90s. But despite how hilarious he was on screen, in many ways he was the archetypal sad clown. Farley's life was often tumultuous thanks to his fondness for drink and drugs. By the time of his untimely death on December 18, 1997, he'd been indulging in several substances for a long time. Alcohol, cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and mushrooms were all on the table, along with his penchant for overeating. While Farley was a man with many vices, he was also acutely aware of his shortcomings and often tried to get his destructive habits under control. He went to Overeaters Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. He did stints at rehab and weight loss centers. According to Entertainment Weekly, during his final 2 years alone, he made at least 17 trips to rehab and attempted all sorts of purges and programs.
This time I'm not just talking the talk, but I'm going to be walking the walk.
Farley visited one particular detox center, Hazelden, so often that a friend of his said they should have named a wing after him. Unfortunately, none of Farley's many attempts at cleaning up his act stuck, as he always relapsed sooner or later. Everyone who's familiar with Chris Farley's particular brand of comedy knows that he was extremely physical and agile for such a large man. This was no mere fluke, as he really did have great athletic prowess. A 1998 Rolling Stone article discussed how he was an excellent athlete during his school years. He was a fantastic swimmer, and his size made him a natural choice for the football team. At his peak, he was an all-city defensive lineman, but alas, his dreams of becoming a pro never came to fruition as his 5'9", 230-pound frame wasn't quite large enough to make it in the big leagues. Having been let down by his own size, young Farley was left to figure out another way to make sense of his life. He was still quite big enough to draw ridicule from other kids, and he developed a habit of making fun of himself as a coping mechanism. So he decided to draw inspiration from his hero, John Belushi, and make comedy his new contact sport. Even though his original football-based career plans didn't pan out, the physical training he went through helped with his whirlwind style of comedy. SNL boss Lorne Michaels has even described Farley as an athlete who knew how to use his body and could play hurt. Being on the heavier side wasn't always easy for Farley. In fact, he endured a childhood full of bullying in which he was pelted with some awful nicknames. He revealed to Rolling Stone some of the worst. Fartley, Lardass, Tubby, and of course Fatso was standard. To counteract this attack, he often used his talent for comedy as a defense mechanism, mocking his own weight before others could. Fame and adulthood weren't enough for Farley to escape the occasional nasty remark, and the barbs weren't always weight-themed. He told Rolling Stone a story of meeting Hustler magazine founder Larry Flynt at the Academy Awards, revealing that Flynt told him, "It's good to see somebody make it that didn't make it all the way through puberty." It goes without saying that Farley was less than impressed by this burn, and indeed he described his own reaction as, "Well, f*** you." Farley suffered from a serious heart disease called atherosclerosis, which authorities considered to be a significant contributing factor to his death. This condition is no laughing matter. According to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, it makes the fat, calcium, and other things in your blood build up inside the arteries as a substance called plaque. As the buildup progresses, it disrupts blood flow, giving your body less and less oxygen-rich blood. This can lead to some serious problems like strokes, heart attacks, or even death. As funny and talented as Chris Farley was, his success wasn't enough to keep his insecurity at bay.
Dang it, what an idiot!
He was uncomfortable with his weight, and he secretly feared that he might lose his comedy edge. When Rolling Stone interviewed him, he opened up about his deep insecurities and admitted that he was, quote, always terrified. According to Farley himself, his often bombastic behavior was a reaction to his fear of people, and he was deeply scared that his movies wouldn't do well and he'd stop getting acting work. Other sources of terror included kissing up to studio executives, losing weight only to discover that he wouldn't be funny anymore, and even telling a great joke. He felt that when the roar of laughter died down, what followed was, quote, the most terrifying silence you've ever heard. That's a lot of insecurities piling up on one man, especially one who lived his life in the limelight. And Farley's fears and insecurities weren't all about his professional life. He also had worries based around religion, and he was concerned that he'd never be able to settle down with a nice woman and start a family. In the documentary I Am Chris Farley, one of Farley's SNL castmates, Mike Myers, talked about how he used to do improv with Farley at Chicago's Second City Comedy Club. He noted that Farley had a reputation as a physically hazardous coworker. As Myers put it, "I was scared to death because he had already knocked someone's tooth out and given someone else a scar just from being so crazy." Farley eventually made it to the greener pastures of Saturday Night Live and beyond, but this didn't necessarily mean that his coworkers were any safer than before. In 2016, Adam Sandler revealed on an episode of Conan that Farley once threatened to punch David Spade, his good friend and castmate. Spade took care to stay out of Farley's reach the following day, even after Farley dismissed this threatening voicemail as a joke.
I go, I didn't sound like you were kidding. He goes, "Don't tell Lorne."
Oh, yeah.
During a 2015 appearance on The Late Late Show with James Corden, Spade said that things once got much worse when the pair were shooting Tommy Boy. Farley hated when Spade went to have drinks with Rob Lowe while he slept, and he had his vengeance the next day as he crunched Spade's hand with his boots, and then Spade threw his Diet Coke at him.
It was straight out of, like, Atlanta Housewives or something.
They fought.
Yeah.
What do you
remember? And then he threw me down the
this?
stairs, and then they
It was
said,
like a proper
"Action."
fight.
Yeah.
On December 18, 1997, Chris Farley was found dead in his Chicago apartment by his brother, John. His system contained traces of cocaine, morphine, and marijuana. He was only 33 years old. The 4-day bender that ended his life came shortly after he returned home from a quick stint at the Hazelden Detox Center in Minneapolis. An avid churchgoer, he spent a few days going to Mass and doing normal holiday preparations like baking Christmas cookies and getting a tricked-out tree. His friend Jillian Seeley said that the comedian was quite enthusiastic about an upcoming movie he was starring in called Almost Heroes. Unfortunately, this relatively mellow existence didn't last. On December 14th, Farley began bar hopping through the city's drinking establishments, accompanied by various ladies and tearing through a huge quantity of alcohol and narcotics. According to the book The Chris Farley Show, the comedian's last moments were spent taking drugs with a call girl who eventually stole his watch, took pictures of him collapsed on the living room floor, and left after leaving a note. Farley died alone, and his final words reportedly were, "Don't leave me." It would be inaccurate to say that Chris Farley wasn't successful or popular. He was undoubtedly well-known and well-liked. Some of his fans might argue that the likes of Tommy Boy and Black Sheep are plenty beloved, but there's no arguing that his career was cut tragically short. Had he lived a little longer or been a little luckier, however, the situation might have been very different. In 2012, Splitsider looked into some of the parts Farley never got to play. These included some roles that happened before he passed away, like the ones that went to Jim Carrey in The Cable Guy and Randy Quaid in Kingpin. But the juiciest, most potentially legendary parts are the ones that he missed because of his untimely demise. He was supposed to have a major role in Ghostbusters 3, which ultimately never saw the light of day. He was reportedly considering starring in the film version of the novel A Confederacy of Dunces, and he'd already met with David Mamet regarding a biopic about the silent film actor and comedian Fatty Arbuckle. And it must be noted that he'd landed the title role in Shrek, and he even recorded nearly all of the ogre's lines before passing away.
Nothing like a fire and a noble romantic mission to warm the cockles of your heart.
Yeah. I like my cockles room temperature, thank you very much.
Farley's various addictions were not a surprise to those close to him or to the public, especially towards the end. As one Chicago columnist wrote, "His may have been the least surprising premature death of a celebrity in show business history." That's not to say that people didn't try to help him along the way. Old friends and family were painfully aware of his excesses. His old SNL boss, Lorne Michaels, fellow actors such as Dan Aykroyd, David Spade, and Tom Arnold, and Farley's own manager all tried to get him to cut out his vast intake. Alas, good advice worked just as poorly as rehab clinics, and sooner or later Farley was back to his old ways. It was particularly bad during his final days, which his friend Gillian Seeley described in a heartbreaking way. According to her, "I know he wanted to get sober, but it was like he had cancer and the chemo treatment didn't work anymore." One thing that actually worked on Farley was work itself. He was aware that whenever he was making movies, he had no choice but to stay clean because the studios wanted to protect their investment and make sure he was on his best behavior. No surprise then that when he was making Almost Heroes, daily AA meetings were reportedly a requirement. When he was recording his lines for Shrek, things were even stricter and he was watched around the clock. But nobody can work all the time, a truth that fans and loved ones of Farley will never forget.
You might remember Phil Hartman from SNL, The Simpsons, or News Radio, but his life was beset with heartbreak, and it ended with an unspeakable tragedy. Phil Hartman's first gig in show business didn't have anything to do with acting and comedy. Hartman got his start in the music industry in the 1970s, with success as a graphic designer specializing in rock and roll. He created more than 40 album covers, including cover art for the 1979 Poco record Legend. But Hartman would get very lonely in the isolating job of drawing all day, and he'd entertain himself by doing different funny voices, which led him to join the Groundlings comedy troupe in 1975. He told JM Showbiz, "I had to find an outlet." It was there that he met fellow performer Paul Reubens, who created a high-voiced man-child character named Pee Wee Herman. Hartman helped Reubens write a stage show featuring the character, which in turn led to a deal to write a big-screen Pee Wee movie.
I know you are, but what am I?
You're an idiot.
I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I?
They wrote Pee Wee's Big Adventure, which begat the Saturday morning show Pee Wee's Playhouse, where Hartman frequently appeared as his salty sailor character Captain Carl. Then Hartman and Reubens cut off contact. Hartman said in 1996, "I still don't speak to Paul Reubens. We just had a falling out and never put it back together." Reubens told Westworld in 2016, "We worked together on a lot of stuff, along with a coffee group of some other groundlings, Phil, me, John Paragon, 3 men and 3 women. We were going to go out and rule the world. That didn't work out very good. I think about Phil all the time." Saturday Night Live enjoyed one of its peaks in the late 1980s with a cast that included Dana Carvey, Jan Hooks, and Phil Hartman, who joined the show in 1986. He built up an array of impressions and characters. He was so vital to SNL that his show nickname was The Glue because he held the show together and was thus one of NBC's most important talents. Hartman planned to leave SNL in 1991, but show producer Lorne Michaels convinced him to stay. Hartman finally left SNL in 1994, but NBC didn't want Hartman to bolt too far, so it pitched him the idea of an updated and reinvented TV variety show featuring sketch comedy and scripted behind-the-scenes banter. It was going to be called The Phil Show. When the similar The Martin Short Show flopped in the fall of 1994, The Phil Show was scrapped, forcing Hartman to sign on for a supporting role in news radio.
Now, much as you'd like to find something juicy here, that's all there is to it. Come on.
Phil Hartman wasn't only a comic actor, he was also an accomplished comedy writer. He won an Emmy as part of the sketch writing staff of Saturday Night Live, but Hartman was never able to get Hollywood to take a chance on his film scripts. According to an interview on Larry King Live with Hartman's brother Josh Hartman, the actor penned numerous scripts that never got made into movies. One script was Mr. Fix-It, a horror comedy he wrote in 1984. In the Hartman biography, You Might Remember Me, Hartman is quoted as describing the script as, quote, an American nightmare about a family that lives near a toxic waste site, where a poisoned water supply makes a son and mother ravenous, and the father's face is torn off in a terrible disfiguring accident in the first act. Back to the Future director Robert Zemeckis tried to get studios and investors interested in Mr. Fix-It, but to no avail. According to individuals in the know, Phil Hartman's marriage to model and actress Brynn Omdahl was often rocky. Hartman and Groundlings member Cassandra Peterson, better known as the pop culture figure Elvira Mistress of the Dark, were friends for years, so Peterson figured she could be honest with Hartman and tried to discourage him from marrying Omdahl in 1987. Peterson told Mr. Showbiz, "She was a very troubled person with a lot of problems." According to Mike Thomas's Hartman biography You Might Remember Me, when Hartman told Peterson he was proposing, she claimed that she exclaimed, quote, "Oh God, no." Peterson reported that Hartman then stormed away from her. She said, "It was the first time, and I think last time, I ever saw him angry." The two performers had a major falling out that lasted for years because of Peterson's reservations about Omdahl. Brynn Omdahl struggled with personal problems before and during her marriage to Phil Hartman. According to Brynn's brother Greg Omdahl, she developed a drug problem in the 1980s after moving to Los Angeles. She reportedly got sober and lived a drug-free lifestyle for the better part of a decade, but eventually started using cocaine again. At a 1997 Christmas party at Hartman's home, Phil Hartman's news radio co-star Andy Dick gave cocaine to Omdahl. Hartman's friend John Lovitz told the New York Post, "Phil was furious about it." According to a friend who spoke with the Los Angeles Times in 1998, Brynn checked into a rehabilitation facility. That put a strain on the marriage, and Omdahl reportedly co-wrote a chillingly prophetic screenplay about a woman who shoots her husband and then takes her own life. The tumultuous marriage of Phil and Brynn Hartman ended in May 1998 in tragedy. According to the Los Angeles Times, police were dispatched to the Hartmans' California home after receiving a report of gunshots. They arrived to find 9-year-old Sean Hartman and Omdahl's son, running out the front door. The authorities went into the house and removed their 6-year-old daughter, Bergen. A search of the house revealed that Omdahl had taken her own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound after fatally shooting Hartman in his sleep. According to a coroner's report from Los Angeles County, Brynn had an extremely high blood alcohol level, as well as a significant amount of cocaine in her system, along with a prescribed dose of a common antidepressant. Brynn Omdahl was 40 years old at the time of her death. Phil Hartman was 49. Phil Hartman's shocking and tragic death in 1998 was devastating for his family and friends and sent waves through Hollywood, altering or outright canceling multiple Hartman-starring projects in the works. The two recurring characters he voiced on The Simpsons, D-list actor Troy McClure and sketchy lawyer Lionel Hutz, were immediately retired rather than recast. On the animated series Futurama, Hartman was set to voice arrogant space captain Zap Brannigan, but Billy West took over, performing the character in tribute to Hartman and how he thinks the late actor might have done it. Hartman's long-running sitcom News Radio was still in production at the time of his death. The following 5th season premiere found the cast tearfully memorializing the actor and his character Bill McNeil. Hartman's close friend and SNL castmate John Lovitz filled the vacancy in the cast as a new character.
And he was like the big brother I always wanted, and he was just the nicest guy ever, and we became
the best of friends.
Yeah, like brothers.
Phil Hartman, one of the greats.
He's convinced millions and millions of people to embrace their silly sides, but there's always been darkness lurking nearby in Adam Sandler's personal and professional lives. In the early 1990s, Saturday Night Live was dominated by a tight-knit group of male cast members known as the Bad Boys of SNL. That group included Sandler, as well as David Spade, Chris Rock, and Chris Farley. By the middle of the decade, Sandler and Farley had both extended their fame onto the big screen, and then they both departed the show at the end of the 20th season in 1995. You might think that they left of their own accord to chase after bigger and better things, but as it turns out, they were actually fired. Sandler realized it wasn't a decision from anyone directly associated with the show, but rather an NBC executive who didn't care for the Bad Boys. He was left feeling sad, angry, and confused, as SNL was his comedy home.
At the time, I was hurt because I didn't know what else I was going to do.
Sandler also explained that he and Farley pretended to be angry over the situation, but that they were actually deeply hurt. 1995's Billy Madison was the first film that Adam Sandler co-wrote and headlined as a lead actor. It's since built up a significant fan base, but upon release, it was hit with savagely negative critical reviews. Gene Siskel, for one, called it the latest entry in the American cinema's investigation of dumb and dumber heroes. The vitriolic tone of the reviews blindsided the usually optimistic Sandler, as he told the Washington Post in 2023, "When Billy Madison came out and I realized I'm going to be in the newspaper, that was a big deal. And then I read a couple reviews and I was like, woof, that hurts. I thought they would have a good time with it like I did." The reception wasn't much better for Sandler's next starring vehicle, Happy Gilmore. So he then decided to avoid reviews of his films as much as possible. As he explained to Deadline in 2022, "Maybe we shouldn't read this stuff because it's so harsh." That same year, he told AARP, "I invite all these amazing people I care about to make movies with me, and I wish they didn't have to read about whatever we've made, but I don't get too shook up." Sandler was raised in New Hampshire by his parents, Judy and Stanley Sandler, a teacher and an electrical contractor, respectively. The influence of his parents is a big theme throughout his career. For example, he released an album called Stan and Judy's Kid, and the basketball scout he played in the 2022 movie Hustle was named after and based on his father. Stanley Sandler made his own film debut in 2002, voicing the father of his son's character in the animated movie 8 Crazy Nights. Soon after the release of that film, Stanley died at the age of 68 following a lung cancer diagnosis. Losing his dad understandably had a profound effect on the younger Sandler. As he admitted to Parade in 2009, "I went through stuff with my dad before he died. I saw firsthand what goes on with people who are incredibly sick." In a 2020 Facebook post, Sandler remembered his dad by writing, "My dad, the greatest man I ever knew. Great husband."
Yes, I love my dad more than anything.
In the 2008 movie You Don't Mess with the Zohan, Adam Sandler played an Israeli counterterrorism agent who tries to leave it all behind to become a hairdresser. It might sound like a wildly original idea that only Sandler and his collaborators could come up with, but a lawsuit alleging copyright infringement suggested otherwise. Robert Cabell is the creator of the cartoon character James Blonde, a Navy SEAL who quits that gig to become a hairdresser. He wields a gun-hairdryer combo that's similar to the way Sandler's character holds a hairdryer like a gun in the Zohan poster. Cabell claimed that Sandler's production company knew about James Blonde because a Happy Madison executive wrote to him on MySpace. After Zohan was made, Cabell sent a cease and desist letter to Sandler and attempted negotiations before filing a suit in 2009, as Zohan spelled the end of a reportedly in-the-works James Blonde film. A judge ultimately dismissed the case in 2011, and that wasn't the only legal trouble that Sandler has ever faced, as a negligence lawsuit was filed by a member of the set-building crew of the 2012 movie That's My Boy. A carpenter who worked on the film sued for $1 million in damages after he accidentally had parts of some fingers excised and broke some hand bones while working with a table saw that wasn't fortified with safety equipment. Adam Sandler's 2015 Netflix Western comedy The Ridiculous Six intended to send up the dated and offensive tropes associated with that genre. But then, about a dozen Native American performers walked off the set. As actor Lauren Anthony told Indian Country Today Media Network, "We were supposed to be Apache, but it was really stereotypical and we did not look Apache at all. We looked more like Comanche. They just treated us as if we should just be on the side." When some of the Native American actors spoke with Sandler and other producers, they were reportedly told that the script wouldn't be changed. As Sandler told the Associated Press, "It was just a misunderstanding, and once the movie is out, we'll be cleared up." In another scandal related to The Ridiculous Six, Rose McGowan revealed on social media that she was asked to audition for the film, but that she had to wear figure-hugging, bust-enhancing clothes. She later told Entertainment Weekly, "I'm not trying to vilify Adam Sandler, although someone did tell me that when he did his Netflix deal, he said, 'I signed with Netflix because it rhymes with wet chicks.'" I mean, what in the is going on? No.
It's an Adam Sandler movie. Am I, like, dumb? I get it.
In 2022, Sandler shot two very different movies pretty much back-to-back: the action-comedy sequel Murder Mystery 2 and the sci-fi drama Spaceman. He largely acted as his own stuntman on both projects, and an injury sustained during one was exacerbated while working on the other. As he revealed to Variety at the Murder Mystery 2 premiere, "I did Spaceman and I was hanging in the harness all the time. I kept saying, something's going on with my hip, man, I'm in trouble. And then during this and this other movie I did, I was like, yeah, I definitely gotta x-ray that thing. And we were in trouble." Soon after Sandler finished filming Murder Mystery 2, he ended up getting a hip replacement. As he lamented to Variety, "Everything's scary at 56 years old. You never know what the hell you're gonna get up from. I'm sluggy, man. My body hurts." Over the course of his career, Adam Sandler has generated a lot of happy comedy out of some very negative emotions. In his early years especially, he specialized in playing immature men with anger management problems. One of his movies is even called Anger Management. As it turns out, Sandler shares a lot of those emotional and mental health issues as his characters. As he told the Little Gold Men podcast in 2022, "I just have a natural part of my brain that feels like I don't belong here. This feeling uncomfortable and loser stuff I've been doing for years, it's in me." Fortunately though, Sandler says he's grown more peaceful with age. As he explained to AARP in 2022, "I had a quick temper, quick reactions. I made a lot of dumb mistakes and said a lot of stupid things. Eventually, he turned things around, partly with the help of therapy." As he revealed, "I talk to a shrink sometimes. He's given me a plan, sometimes just holding in a sentence, taking a beat for a minute before saying something stupid.